Live now. Erev Tov from Bonn and Berlin, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ursula Schmidt, and on behalf of the Deutsche Israelische Gesellschaft, affiliated in Bonn, I welcome you to our second live stream in 2021. Corona still keeps our everyday lives under control with its restrictions that determine our way to communicate with each other. The most prominent examples are Zoom meetings and live streams on YouTube or Facebook, like this one we have tonight, that have become an integral part of our lives. The current restrictions generate economic hardship to many people, and most of us are deprived of cultural activity, at least in the way we've been used to. Tonight, we will explore new ways of art and communication to overcome closed borders, as well as social distancing imposed on us by the global pandemic. The dance video, Outside, is the result of an Israeli-Japanese co-production that was influenced by the ramifications of COVID-19. It depicts the individual feelings as well as the general public sentiment that emerged during the first period of COVID-19 lockdowns worldwide. Tonight, we will not only see the film, but also talk to its creators. But before we start, let me welcome our guests in this Zoom meeting. Our cooperation partners, Hetty Berg from the Jewish Museum in Berlin and Professor Dr. Stefan Berg from the Kunstmuseum in Bonn. Both of them will address the audience later this evening with their input in separate statements. Also, a very warm welcome to author and education specialist Anita Haviv-Horiner from Netanya, Israel. She has previously worked with us in several projects and will hold a conversation with our two very special guests from Israel tonight. Please let me welcome with you Choreografin Inbal Pinto and author Etgar Keret. I'm very excited and happy to have them both in our show. Before we begin, let me give you a short overview of what to expect. First, you will see the dance video with German subtitles, which is actually a premiere tonight. At this point, I'd like to express our gratitude and special thanks for support to the Culture Department of the Israeli Embassy in Berlin. After the film, Anita will hold the interview with Etgar and Inbal, followed by the short statements of the two Bergs, Hetty Berg and Stefan Berg. You are most welcome to leave a comment or ask all your questions in the YouTube chat. We will forward them to our guests later into the Zoom room. And one last remark from my side. The recording of this live stream will remain on the YouTube channel of the DIK AG Bonn for those who are not able to attend. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's start with the film. Although, I might add, it'll take a couple of seconds for me to switch to the film and back to the conversation, so I kindly ask for your patience. Thank you. Okay, now, everybody's camera off, please. Yes, thank you. So,
夜間外出禁止令が解除されてから3日が経ちました。しかし明らかに誰も家から出てこようとはしません。理由は定かではありませんが、一人きりであろうが家族とであろうが皆家の中にとどまりたかった。私たち政府は皆さんが適応するために数日間の猶予を与えましたが、事態の好転が見込めないことが明らかになると、もはや選択の余地はありませんでした。警察や軍隊があなたの家のドアをノックし、家から出るよう命じ始めた。120日間の隔離生活の後なので、あなたが以前生活のためにどのような仕事をしていたのか、それを思い出すのは簡単なことではないかもしれないですよね。
学校にいたのかな。ヤゼポッチで口ひげを生やしかけた少年が君に石を投げつけてきたこと、それはなんとなく覚えてる？君はソーシャルワーカーだったのかな。
ソーシャルワーカー？
家の外の歩道に立っていると、君を外に追い立てた兵士が早く歩き始めろと指示を出してくる。だから君は歩き出す。でもどこに向かっているのかはっきりとはわからないまま、何か手がかりになるものがないかとスマホをスクロールしている。昔の待ち合わせの約束、着信履歴、メモに残した住所だとか。通りではみんなが君を追い越していくけれど、中にはひどいパニックに襲われている人もいる。彼らはまたどこへ向かえばいいのか思い出せないままだし、思い出せたとしてもどうやって行けばいいのか、道も方法もわからないまま。
肺から出た息がヒューッと音鳴るし、うまくやれるか確信が持てない。
ふと見ると ATM の近くに汚れた服を着た男が座っていて、その横にはブリキのコップが置いてある。こういう状況ではどう振る舞うべきなのか、それはよく覚えている。その男の前を素早く通り過ぎ、もう2日間何も食べていないんですというしわがれた声を聞くと、反対の方に目をやって目線を合わせないようにする。まるで プロみたいに。何も怖がることはない。自転車に乗るのと同じだ。すべて体が勝手に覚えている。そして一人でいる間に柔らかくなった心はあっという間にまた固く戻っていく。
So, over to you, Anita. You have to open up your phone. You have to open up your phone.
It's okay now?
Yeah, great.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ursula. And it should be said that you have worked so hard to make this evening come true. So I'm really grateful for all your input. And basically, the history of this event is almost as long as the history of making outside, though I haven't been part of that, but I know how long it took us to get this event going. And basically, this is a symbol of the Corona situation. It was first planned as a real life event. I don't know if some of you remember that there were times when we met actually in the Kunstmuseum Bonn. Then we thought making it a hybrid event, and finally we all had to go digital. But in this case, social distancing created new synergies. It is an Israeli-German event, but also a Bonn-Berlin event. So here we are now, Tel Aviv, Berlin, Bonn, and many other places and even countries through the audience. So thank you very much for all the friends who are joining us. Outside is an Israeli-Japanese co-production shot simultaneously during the coronavirus pandemic in Tel Aviv and in Tokyo. Its protagonists are Israeli dancer Moran Muller and the Japanese actor and dancer Mirai Moriyama. The movie since then, basically since July, is making its way, moving between languages and countries. Screenings have already taken place in Tel Aviv, New York, Tokyo, and today on the wall of the Libeskind-Haus in Berlin, and from tomorrow on the wall of the Kunstmuseum Bonn. When I first saw Outside, it captivated me And since then, it has not lost its magic. The short movie, which we just saw, is the result of the cooperation between two gifted artists who are internationally and in Israel among the leading cultural figures in his and her field. And for the first time, they have joined forces and created this beautiful multidisciplinary work of art. So please let me introduce Inbal Pinto and Etgar Keret. Inbal Pinto, an Israeli choreographer, director, set and costume designer. In 1992, she established the famous Inbal Pinto dance company and was its artistic director until 2018. She created the world of dance theater, which has become her trademark since. Several of Inbal's work, such as the Okan, Oyster, Fugue, and many others have become a milestone in the history of Israeli dance and have been highly acclaimed worldwide. She has directed and designed operas and musicals around the world. Since 2018, Inbal works as an independent artist. Etgar Keret is a leading voice in Israeli literature. His books were published in more than 45 languages. His writing has been published in the New York Times, Le Monde, Die Zeit, just to name a few. And he has received many Israeli and international prizes. And he was honored in France with the decoration of Chevalier de l'Ordre des Arts et des Lettres, which always impresses me very much. In 2007, Keret and his wife Shira Geffen won the Cannes Film Festival's Camera d'Or award for their movie Jellyfish. And since then, they also co-wrote and directed The Middleman in 2019, a French miniseries for Arte, inspired by some of Etgar's stories. Outside is the first time that Inbal made a movie and the first time Etgar worked on choreography. And if I remember well, all that happened in Etgar's kitchen. So let me please start with the first question to Etgar. Before Outside became a movie, it was a short story you wrote. Can you please tell us the story of the story Outside and perhaps 2 or 3 words about the Decameron in the New York Times?
Of course. So first I want to say that almost everything happened in Inbal's kitchen, because if it would have happened in my kitchen, we would have been starved to death before we would have started. And the story Outside was written for let's say the first draft. I wrote it on the first day in which the first lockdown was lifted, because during the lockdown I live very close to a Israeli main street called Dizengoff. It's like the Kudam of, I don't know, Tel Aviv. It's always full of people and action, and all the time of the lockdown I was kind of yearning and waiting for the moment where I could walk that street again. But apparently in the few weeks in which I was kind of disconnected from urban life, or vivid urban life, then I guess I kind of idealized this idea of a lot of people going into the street, all this kind of warmth and feelings that you belong to something. And the moment that I got to the street, I was almost run down by those little scooters that go on the pavements in Tel Aviv. And I saw 2 people fighting over, like, one of them who didn't put the mask the way that another one wanted. And a couple of other people just didn't smell as good as I remember that people are supposed to smell. And after like 10 minutes, I just said, it's enough. I went home and closed the door, almost like saying, oh, I made a mistake. It was kind of a strategical mistake. I should have stayed in my apartment where everything makes sense and nobody kind of interrupts. And and this is where the story started, about this word that its problem after, let's say, the pandemic is beaten, is not is not really the fear of people of the virus, but it's probably our fear from each other. You know, our need to kind of keep social distance in an emotional or a mental way. And I feel that, you know, that in the time of the lockdown, I became much more open, sincere, vulnerable, just because it was only my wife, my son, and my rabbit around, you know. And going out to the street with this feeling was traumatic. And when the New York Times approached me with the idea of the Decameron project, which I think included 27 or 29 writers worldwide, you know, among them, I don't know, Margaret Atwood and many other great writers, to write my take on the pandemic, it went to this territory, because what I felt is that let's say the most common tone when people talk about the pandemic would be, oh, we will always fear to touch each other. We will always, we will not return to hugging people or stuff like that. When I feel that you know, that viruses, they really don't create new realities. They just expose something that was in us. You know, when a virus attacks you, it attacks your weak spot. And in my case, I guess the weak spot was really this ability to go defenseless to the street and interact with people.
Thank you very much. Inbal, many of the stories have been turned into movies, but Outside, as I said, is the first cooperation between the two of you. So what was your first encounter with Outside, and how was the idea born to make a movie? And if I already may add the next question to you, what is the difference to work with dance for a movie and for stage, which is what you usually do?
So the whole process started around May, and I was supposed to direct an opera, and Etgar was supposed to travel around the world. And I got a phone call from Ari Rosen, who is the cultural attaché in Japan, and he said, let's do something. And because everything was canceled for me, I said yes. I didn't know what. And the next thing he said, maybe you should collaborate with Etgar. Etgar is for a couple of times we tried to collaborate. I actually offered him a job like half a year before I got this phone call, and we couldn't make it. So it was a great opportunity to make it happen. And the first story that I read was Outside. Later on, Etgar sent me a few more stories, but I was really moved by this one. And it's really raised existing feeling that was there for me. And for me, when I read stories, the first thing that I would do is actually transform situation into dance, because my work or my art is to do to transform things that I could say in words into movement. And the first images that I had was a woman that stuck on the door between the outside and the in. And the second image was a bonded body, like physical body, a bonded physicality, that someone that someone who lost his purpose. So I mean, it's another way of expressing in physical the words of Etgar and the situation that we lived in. Yeah, so for me, it's something that I do from time to time when I take a story and I transform it to movement. But I never thought I would make film, and so it was a great opportunity to And then Etgar and me met in the kitchen, in my kitchen, and we start working with Moran, who came to my house like every morning. And there was this a feeling of a rush that maybe the pandemic is going to finish in a month or two. So we really rushed to do it very quickly. And then eventually we're still in the same situation. But anyway, we did it in a very short time, the whole process.
How long did it take?
I think the rehearsal took kind of a month, and then the whole production was, around another month with editing and everything, right? If I remember well.
Yeah, we basically shot for 2 days, one day in Israel, in Tel Aviv with Moran, and one day in Tokyo. And when we were directing in Tokyo, we did everything via Zoom and WhatsApp, which was a little bit strange. But I think that I have this kind of inner belief that the way that you make a film is always very close to the film itself. So it's only fitting that that if Moran doesn't get to meet Mirai, then it would be, then we as directors, we cannot meet too. And the fact that we were shooting kind of, let's say, a story about a dialogue, or maybe almost a love story between two actors that didn't occupy the same space, just seemed right.
Thank you. Inbal, is there a difference in working for a movie or for stage, which is basically your trademark?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in film, I mean, it's my first experience really with film, and it was my studies, like, was during this that I would take my camera, my phone, and I would film Moran in the kitchen in different angles, and then I realized how can I make a focus, like zooming in, zooming out. I mean, you can do it on stage, but with a different method. But at the end, you can work from many angles, which in stage you can only be, the audience is in front, where in the film you can look in different angles at the same situation, and that is really interesting for me. It opens
also zoom in. You can zoom in,
yeah,
zoom out.
Exactly, like zoom in, zoom out. It's like, it's totally different. Yeah, and things like breaking glass, something that you wouldn't, I mean, you can break the glass, but you cannot make it as dramatic as you can do in film, or things like that would approach differently. Yeah. I
have a question to both of you. Before, I would like to learn something about the two performers. Did you create a dystopia? The question is to both of you.
I think that first and foremost, we created a fable or a fairy tale. And one could argue that, that most fairy tales, or many of the fairy tales, they have some kind of a dystopian nature. I mean, if you talk about Grimm brothers tale, I mean, the fact that there is a witch living in a forest, in a house made of candies, and eats little children, it's not something that, it's not it doesn't sound very liberal or democratic, it's something that we would all condemn. And I think that the way the story that was basically psychological and realistic was transformed to this word, it kind of allowed the entire dialogue to be more allegorical, and this kind of a fable-like allegory, it says something maybe sad about humanity, but I think that that there is also something very hopeful in it, seeing the man in the TV and the woman finding comfort one in another when they are not in the same space, they don't speak the same language, they don't belong to the same race. So there is hope there too.
I think also we as soon as we became framed like we are now, we became closer. We became like it's all become like a small village and it's very easy to communicate in that sense. I found myself communicating more and more with far people than I communicate with close people. So it happened, that it's actually, and I think also in this movie, although we are talking about the pandemic and very negative feelings, I think using humor and using creativity, it's a way of art to handle those kind of situations and to give those things new faces.
And I want to say also about this idea of the dystopian or utopian thought, that what I think is that many times when we talk about the pandemic, we talk about the obvious things. It's a medical threat. It can kill people. It hurts people. It has a huge negative effect about the economy. But I think, I don't know if it's being a writer or being kind of a second generation to optimistic Holocaust survivors, then I think that we can take many positive things out of it. It doesn't mean that we should order another pandemic, but for me, let's say if I use it as a metaphor, there is something about a pandemic. It's like moving an apartment. I haven't moved for 27 years. That's how much I like it. But I have to admit that when I move and I take out all my stuff, I find a lot of stuff that I actually never needed, and I get rid of it. And I find things of value that were hidden somewhere down there. And because I'm moving, I can just put them in the living room in my new apartment. So I really feel that the narrative we should avoid is kind of using the pandemic as an excuse to the fact that our life sucks. Our life kind of sucked before it. It's not like, that we were friendly and nice to each other and everything was great before. And I think that our life offers a lot of potential and new things with the pandemics or after the pandemic. It's just a kind of a question of acknowledging the fact that our dialogue with the pandemic is a complex one. It's like, because for me, like another metaphor that I have in my mind is as if most of humanity had gone on retirement. We were all retired. It's like, it doesn't matter if you organize events or if you're making movies or if you're directing operas. We're all kind of, we got our gold watch and our pension, and we are now sitting home. So
not all of us got the pension.
Or without the pension, and without the watch. But I'm saying that this ability to kind of look at the narrative we've been going on with all our life, kind of from a distance and in a critical way, it has a strong existential effect. There are people who fell in love again after 20 years during lockdown, and there are couples who are probably divorced. But when you deal with this kind of things, then I'm saying that aside all those obvious things that we can say about the pandemic, I think that it can also be a time in which we can learn a lot about ourselves and our wishes.
Thank you, Edgar. Always cheering up. Really and this positive angle. Inbal, could you tell us something about the two performers?
Yeah. Moran is working with me for a couple of years. She's incredible dancers with acting qualities, and she's also a pianist. So in few of my work, she's playing piano, but also in outside, she's playing the real suite of she's really playing it. She really knows the chord of it. And Mirai, I met first time I met in Japan when I directed with Avshalom Polak the musical The Cat Who Lives a Million Times. And Mirai was starring in this musical. After this production, he came to Israel and he was dancing for me for a year. He's very known actors, film actors, theater dancers. Over talented. and really whatever he touches is incredible. Together with Umitaro, who wrote, actually I met also in the same production, I met Umitaro Abe, who composed the music for this film. Yeah, also incredible, and he's doing, he's also writing for film, for theater. He learned in France. And I think what is really beautiful in Umitaro that on the first time I met him, that he has a very unique style. It's not like, you know, those composers that can write operas and I don't know, lullabies, and he has a distinguished style that, and I really appreciate in artists that you can acknowledge their styles, you know.
Thank you. Were there, this is a question to both of you, any cultural differences to be gapped between Israel and Japan, or was it just no problem?
Well, you know, in dance, there's no language. So in dance, you can be German, Italian, French, or Israeli, and there's no different. It's a body. And that's,
but in literature, there is language.
Yeah, it's true. But in dance, we worked with Mirai and on his movement, there's no difference. We understood immediately the.
Yeah, I know. I felt that, you know, the way that I worked with actors is many times that I give them examples from situation in real life, and I felt that many times when I would give examples, then Mirai would kind of look at it kind of suspiciously because as if many things that Israelis would do, like, you know, if I would say to him, you know, if you are in a restaurant and there isn't enough space, so you sit on somebody's knee just so you fit in the table, and he would go like
yes.
Who is this guy, you know? And I think also that there is something right about that, because if we are talking about a meeting of people from two different parts of the world dealing with some kind of a global catastrophe, then for me, there is something positive about the fact that there are people in different parts of the world that actually process this global reality in a different way and keep something from the culture and ethos, and are not just influenced by their Facebook feed.
Okay. It's a lot. I think it just opens up worlds. Basically, that's what you have done through the work you just presented, and also what you're telling us. I would like to ask both of you, what did you learn about choreography, about dance, and what did you learn about literature? So each one referring to her own field and to the field of the other.
What did I learn about dance? You know, the pandemic brought dance many changes, and some are good and some are bad because we cannot perform. And so the most damaged, I think, art form was dance, which needed space and the interaction with the audience. And at the beginning, I thought there will be a new form, something will grow from this situation, this burdens, this limitation, because in every arts action, limitations are a growth of new ideas. So I thought something new will, and I think it's still in a process that we are still learning it, because for sure dance was interacting with film more than usual, and you can see on in many places you can see a lot of dance film, you know, and but I think not everyone took it to make the perfect hybrid. And I think what we are searching now, because we are limited in stage and we are limited in space for dancing, we need to find a new way to make this hybrid.
Thank you. Etgar?
With me, first of all, I think that when I spoke with Inbal about the choreography, you know, kind of wanting to take a part in it, then it took me a lot of time to accept the fact that there is a lot about dance that is kind of unarticulated or irrational, that it's not like that you can say I make a big plan and I put little things in it. There is something about it, or at least the way that Inbal works, that it's kind of you have a big frame, but in it it's kind of you work bottom up. You work from details, movement, and you construct them together. And it was something that actually made it closer to me, because I usually write short fiction. There is something about writing short fiction that also its root is some kind of a sensation or a sentence or something that had happened. So for me, I learned that dancing wasn't as far as I thought that it was for me, and that the idea of working in a medium that isn't entirely verbal is also a possibility, especially when you have a wonderful partner to work with. And what I've learned about literature was really, like, you know, to be honest, like, I didn't learn it in this project, but it got really strongly reinforced in this project, that when you adapt a text to another medium, the only justification one has to do as for it, if you create something that is totally different. The idea, because I think that when we worked on the adaptation all the time, I think I hope I also projected to Inbal, but the idea was kind of to feel the story, but to kind of forget it. And you know, the story is called Outside. The story takes place outside, but we shot it in a film when it was inside. And this, as Inbal said, it was half a constraint, because in the time of pandemic, it's difficult to shoot outside. Even to shoot inside a place, it wasn't that easy. And the idea that if one reads the story in the New York Times and see our work, he will have a different experiences. You know, I think that maybe the feeling is that he will leave the movie will be slightly different. It's not as if they're saying contradictory things, but it's like two branches that kind of split from the same root and went to their individual places. And again, you know, I think many times when you're a writer and others adapt your work, then you have this instinct when you say, "Oh, I didn't mean that." And it's a good thing to remember, you know, as a writer, that when somebody adapts your work, it doesn't fax your work from one medium to another. It doesn't make a movie from your book because some people don't feel like reading books, but he does it, so he will share with people his own reading, his own word, his own set of associations. And I can say for sure that I'm reluctant to adapt my own work, because the truth is you need a very interesting reading of your work, or of a work, to adapt it. And my reading is very standard. I wrote it, so I read it the way that it's written. And that I would have never thought of collaborating this work if I wouldn't have the ability to work with Inbal and know that all my thoughts were more about her dance world and the work that he does. And it helped me kind of give up some kind of an ownership of the story and feel liberated to go to different places with the same text.
Now that I hear you and that I've watched the movie again, I just feel that the title is so, you know, it's exactly what it also did to me. It allowed me to step outside from my own life in this time of the pandemic and just look at it in a different way. And that's basically what art is all about. And you did that through this movement, through this combination of movement and words and music. So that's wonderful. So that now to my last question to the two of you, do you plan any new projects together?
We wish, we want to, we really want to. We are all the time searching for what is the next one, right?
And it's really like, you know, with this project, then basically I think it brought both of us back to the basic of creating, because I think that, that there is also a bit of a curse in being established and being in the field for a long time, because everything is very, very easy, and many times you're passive. People ask you to submit something, ask you to do a project, and you go, and here we were both kind of fighting to make this project, fighting for budget, fighting for a crew, and when it was really fighting for places in which it will be seen. And it created a wonderful partnership from the beginning. And and it ends with you, Anita, and with Ursula, and with the people in the Jewish Museum in Berlin, that everybody kind of worked outside of the box, and everybody kind of volunteered to take this forward. And I must say that when we work on the second project, then except for the fact that we know that we like to work together and that we learn from each other, we have to deal again from the fact that there are no basic resources to do what we're doing. So the moment that we think of anything that will be larger than Inbal's kitchen, then we also have to figure out a way of who will support it, who will want to show it, and it pushes you to another field of creativity.
Yeah, but I'm sure you'll find a way. Now that leads me, first of all, to say thank you so much to the two of you. It's so inspiring to listen to you, to watch your work, not only outside, but everything you do. And I think the combination of the two of you is just wonderful. But talking about the future, I would like to ask Hetty Berg, the director of the Jewish Museum in Berlin, to open her mic and to tell us why she, as she said to us, was so excited about this work and this event, and how relevant it is for your work. Welcome, Mrs. Hetty Berg.
Thank you, Anita, and thank you, Etgar Keret and Inbal Pinto, for this highly relevant and really great artwork. I hope there are many more to come from both of you out of your kitchen. It's also my pleasure to thank our partners, Ursula Schmidt from the Deutsche Israelische Gesellschaft and Stefan Berg from the Kunstmuseum Bonn, helping to bring this remarkable work to Bonn and the Jewish Museum Berlin, where it is screened now on the outside wall of the Liebeskind building, as you can see here behind me, for 2 hours every evening until this coming Sunday. So we're really very excited about that, to be able to show something outside in real space. Outside, this COVID-19 fairy tale is a beautiful and disturbing commentary, a miniature of the current global state. Indeed, it knows no boundaries between the miniature, the personal sphere, and the global, as Corona is, the intimate solitude of the lockdown, the isolation experienced globally. This short performance can be understood in almost every place in our world these days. It needs no translation. It is blind, as Corona is, to differences of nation, language, culture. Keret's and Pinto's work pose a question which is also globally valid. Did we forget how to walk? Should we forget the way we walked? Should we learn a new way of walking? Shortly after entering our new permanent exhibition at the Jewish Museum Berlin, the visitors are invited to listen to a video projection of a conversation between female and male rabbis, philosophers, and members of the Jewish communities. A conversation under this very same topic, the way you walk. They refer to Jewish traditions, customs, to Jewish thought, and the way all these persist and evolve in the face of time, of change. Walking through the new permanent exhibition is as well a walk from the past through the catastrophe to the present days. It is a question about the many Jewish walks in our days, Germany, Europe, and the world. And so the Jewish Museum Berlin, like the Kunstmuseum in Bonn and other museums, become the ideal place to confront this question. How did we once walk? How can we and how do we want to walk in the future? Do we want to, as in this staggering video, relearn, remember how to ignore the homeless person on the street, mechanically re-walk the path of the past? Or do we want to, do we dare to practice a new walk altogether? Corona will become one day a memory. Do we want to remember this connection between the miniature, the intimate, and the global, as Corona taught us? I dare say the museum is quite a fitting place to get inspired and re-practice walking. I therefore cordially invite you to come to the Jewish Museum Berlin as soon as it is open again, to walk through our new permanent exhibition, the newly opened Children's Museum Anoa, and the many other venues of the museum. Thank you for this evening and goodbye from Berlin.
Thank you so much, Hetty. And personally, I can't wait to come to Berlin and see the museum. And good luck. Thank you so much. Professor Stefan Berg, the word is yours. And thank you also for immediately agreeing to go for the project. So let's hear what you want to tell us.
Okay, hello everybody on the outside and also on the inside, of course. I feel very honored that I can contribute with a few words to this wonderful event. When I watched Outside by Inbal Pinto and Etgar Keret for the first time, I knew immediately that I wanted to show it at the Kunstmuseum Bonn. The film sums up very well the profound change that the coronavirus has brought to the world. Still, it conveys an almost playfully light atmosphere. Pinto's and Keret's wonderfully paradoxical idea that after 120 days in which people were not allowed to leave their homes, they have unlearned their need for the outside world, makes clear how much the virus has turned our lives upside down. Yet, the film also shows how art can create a new way for us to deal with reality. The virus has forced us as museums too to face new challenges. We are closed, and yet we have to and want to keep on communicating our work to the outside world. This makes us realize how much we are trapped inside our boxes, just like the film's protagonists are trapped inside their homes, where they acrobatically, but not to avail, move through their TV and other apartment rooms. How can we communicate in a situation where communication is almost only possible electronically or digitally? How do we overcome the distance that now is part of every encounter? The film illustrates particularly well the frantic standstill that this situation generates. Everything is always moving without ever getting anywhere. It's been almost a year that we are living with the virus, and I've learned from my museums that a lot of things can be done digitally. Online guided exhibition tours and discussions, digital formats that introduce the stuff in their field of work, which is usually not visible to the visitors, games of I Spy using works from our museum collection. Still, all these new possibilities cannot replace the sensuality of directly experiencing art. Something else that our current life in the box has made me aware of is that after the pandemic, we, I mean the museums, cannot continue doing part of our work as we used to. We have to stop fueling and inflating the global art circus with ever more spectacular projects and loans being transported from one end to the world to the other, resulting in horrendously high insurance sums. We need to return to focusing on what is essential to a museum, its own collection and all the questions that emerge from that. We need more regional cooperation and genuine collaboration instead of global art tourism. Therefore, being locked in, as frustrating as it may often be, might eventually have a positive effect on our future. Thank you very much, and goodbye from Bonn.
Thank you so much, Professor Berg. I think you just joined Edgar, who also said, or basically Inbal and Edgar, who said that we can learn something from this difficult situation.
Yeah.
And now I would like to open the floor to questions of the audience, and you are most welcome to ask questions, Inbal and Edgar, but also Hetty Berg and Professor Berg. And please just make your questions short. And we will see them in the chat, and I will read them out to our protagonists.
The host needs to open my video.
Inbal?
ענבל, אני חושב שאת צריכה ללחוץ רק על הכפתור
No,
של
it's not because the host stopped it, so yeah.
אני הצלחתי להפעיל, אז נסי לעשות פשוט...
אני ניסיתי, I pressed it, כן.
Ursula, where's Ursula?
Okay, I made it. Okay. It's okay.
Okay, are there any questions coming from the audience? Do we need some minutes?
I can say something without a question, as if I answered some. It just that what I think is that through this year, you know, in Israel, I think unlike other places, many of the artists find themselves with no work and no way to earn a living, you know, and there was no kind of a program that had to deal with the arts. So I think that a lot of the discussion was about how, in this time of the pandemic, artists can be supported, you know, and there was not enough discussion in my taste about how can we create in this environment and how can we get new art out in this environment, because in many ways it kind of felt, you know, the same ways that we avoided human company, that this year should be kind of in many ways artless, you know, in that sense that it will be difficult, you know, to shoot new movies. You cannot do new operas, you can't do theater. All those kind of things are very, very limited. And I'm saying that, you know, that if this problem will be here to stay, I think that a lot of the focus should be about how let's say art funds and art institutes can become a co-creator and the leading force in creating new kinds of experiences. I can say that, you know, from this example, that, you know, that Stefan and Hetty, you know, were immediately jumped aboard and helped us and supported, and the idea of screening the films on the exterior of the museum in this kind of time, making this some kind of an installation in a half-empty public space. And what I feel is that both, like, I'm talking about ministers of culture, managers of museums, artists, we should all become more agile and more flexible in that sense, that instead of kind of, as Hetty said, instead of walking the same walk we walked before, we will kind of stop every moment and think about the new steps that we can make and that are essential here. Because I think that I'm talking now just, you know, not as an artist, but just as a guy sitting home and watching a lot of Netflix movies, that I feel that I'm going on some kind of a diet that in which I can return to classics, and I see with my son old movies and I read old books, but the contemporary effect of art being this kind of shout of pain or shout of warning, has diminished because of all those physical limitations. And I think that part of our creativity and imagination should really go there. It should really go to this idea of what new things we can create and what new kind of interactions could happen with the audience, because this should be our role as artists and art institutes to keep art pumping and going through our veins.
But what Stefan Berg said was that basically, as I understood you, that museums need to kind of shrink in terms of their project, in terms of their, you know,
I didn't
that
say,
well.
The way that I heard it was basically that there is something about museums that they should be more local, that we should
yes, exactly.
This McDonald's, but actually being the challenge of bringing this localness to the world is a big challenge,
exactly.
because let's say what we knew about a museum is that you are in a space and you take your distance from the exhibition and you deal with that. But when this does not exist, this is really a field, a new inventive field that a lot of it has to do with the interface or the dialogue or the kind of language that we need to speak in this new world. And I think that you know, that let's say when people split the roles, you know, like I'm a writer, so I should write a story. And I'm saying that supposedly somebody saying I'm a head of an institute, so I should have the institute keep on going. Then it seems as if the border that we can drop is basically this idea of how, in a meta level, we deal with this situation. What kind of new project can we or should we initiate? And I'm saying that all of us are doing it, but I think that it's good to be especially aware on that spot, on really saying how can we resonate art in the world all the time, bring new things, talk about the present, and not only kind of just have some kind of a nostalgic past shown. And I think that we needed a time of a global emergency, you know, to want to do it. And today we live in a very technological world in which reaction time became shorter and shorter. Things could almost be immediate. If somebody wants to, I don't know, make a techno piece in which people are singing to the doctors in Italy and somebody else is doing something else in China, then I'm saying you need to have a good idea. You need to have, but technically it can be done. And
everything is possible. So let's ask Hetty Berg, can you relate to that? Is there something which goes hand in hand with your vision, or do you see that more as a problem, as a challenge? What does this kind of perspective do to your work?
I can relate very much to what Etgar just said, but also what Stefan said before, which has a lot to do with the blockbuster mentality and the marketing and how exciting and unique everything always has to be. Instead of that, you can also do sometimes something small and very, very intricate and very worthwhile that maybe doesn't have this huge ring about it. And I think that maybe, as Etgar said, this has been a time to value again the things close by and the things that maybe you thought you knew, but you can learn a lot from or get to know better. And in that way, I think it's that is a very nice challenge, and also the way to treat the present situation and to create possibilities with artists, together with artists, also together with other people from the communities around us. To create things with meaning, because that's what we're all looking for meaningful things.
Could you imagine, there's a question from the chat, to produce stage performances in your museum? The question would go to both museum directors.
Well, if I may answer, this is something We have a big program of events and music, jazz in the garden, all kind of performances, not big theater performances like, that doesn't, for that we don't have the facilities, but of course a museum is much more than a place where you exhibit your collections. It's a place where people meet each other, where you meet stories, where you meet objects, where you meet ideas, and where it's also a place to exchange ideas and to have a dialogue, and that takes place here when we're open, luckily all the time.
I can only underline what Hetty was saying. Museums are open spaces, open to everyone, open to every discourse. So of course, also stage performances is wonderful and is most welcome. And I just wanted to add something to what has been said before. I think we really, as museums, we forced ourselves for a too long time to be like part of the tourism industry, and we have to become more specific. And so I think just concentrating on the collection, which is of course the heart of the museum, allows you to act in a way that kind of combines local activities and global activities. I'm not talking about shrinking to a kind of provincial state. I'm just talking that out of the fact that you're concentrating on the fundament of your institution, and that is a collection, that can really make you strong. And I think the public now, and also the politicians, and maybe also the sponsors, I hope so, and then are now in the situation that they maybe understand that this is what is needed, and not a kind of endless blockbuster story of where everybody exhibits nearly the same thing in their spaces. So I think this is the time now, and so to a certain extent, I'm grateful to COVID-19, partly.
Okay, that's really seeing the half full glass. There are two questions, one to Etgar and to Inbal. How did you cope with isolation and loneliness during the first lockdown, and how are you dealing with it today? Are there any differences between now and then? I mean, on a personal level, I suppose the question is meant.
For me, it's opportunity to experiment different skills that I have by more painting and experiment, trying to transform dance into paper. Like, how can I print dance in a way, or make animation, so this is kind of thing that I always try to make hybrid of different skills, and I never had the time and the chance to experiment really the time of like just doing art, like painting. So I that's what I'm doing most of the time. I'm painting a lot.
So we will have an exhibition of yours sometime?
Maybe. I'm working on it.
Great.
She's an amazing painter. But with me, I want to say that the first lockdown was in a strange way very exciting, because there were many things to observe. It's like, for example, suddenly you can hear birds, even though you live in the heart of the city. you kind of capture new sights and they look in a different way. And also for me, it was very creative, because one of the essential things, at least for me, for creativity, is that you need to be frustrated and bored to begin with. Because if you're happy and busy, then there's no reason for you to go and write, So I think the first lockdown was really, really easy. It wasn't that huge difference from my normal life, in which most of the time I spend alone in a room. And I must say that this lockdown, the third lockdown, suddenly there was kind of a switch in my mind, and suddenly it became difficult. Suddenly there was something about it that I kind of got used to this huge shock of this difference, and I find myself kind of sinking already to some kind of a new routine, which was kind of a less kind of a de-evolving as a human being, getting used to doing a little less, getting used to checking out of my friends a little less, getting used to seeing movies and stopping to see them in the middle. So it's actually now for me it's a down point, but it would have been boring if it was all the time the same.
Thank you. I think many of us can understand what you feel. One last question to our two museum directors. This year in Germany, we celebrate 1,700 years of Jewish life in Germany. Do you plan any events given the circumstances? Hetty, please.
Yes, well, the topic of the Jewish Museum in Berlin is 1,700 years of Jewish life in Germany. So in that sense, it's for us an easy game and a very important one this year, that in the whole of Germany, there's so many initiatives to give this topic also very locally all over attention. So that is really wonderful. And as we just opened our new permanent exhibition, which is really exquisite and very, very well done and interesting. We were only open for 2 months in the last year. So as soon as we reopen, of course, we do hope that all the people in Berlin and everybody that's close enough to come will see this new exhibition that has exactly this topic. And besides that, we'll have a wonderful show of Yael Bartana. It's called Redemption Now. That also has a lot to do with history of Jews in Germany and of Jews in Germany today. And we'll have an exhibition of Frederik Brenner, the photographer. It's called Healed to Pieces, which also has everything to do with Jewish life in Berlin today. So those are our big programs for this year. And further, there's a very big program of events like this one that I was very happy that we could have.
Thank you very much, Professor Berg.
I must admit, until now, there's nothing scheduled. But we also have been so busy with postponing all the projects that we couldn't show from 2020 and early 2021. So we need to rearrange the whole program, which is really not just fun. So let's see what we can do. But yeah, that's until now the situation.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank all of you. I think personally I learned a lot and I found it really, really, really very interesting and enlightening. And I think what's so beautiful about art is it gives us strength to cope with everyday life, and especially in such difficult times. I would like to ask Inbal and or Etgar, if you want to say one last sentence to close this event. Just if you want, you don't have to. One sentence, Etgar.
So I just want to say that usually you say, I want to thank everybody. It wouldn't have been possible without you. But in this case, all the people in the screen were essential to this event and went out of the way to make it happen. So I'm really grateful.
Inbal?
I'm joining Edgar's words. Thank you, everyone, for making it happen. It's really, for us, it's for me as a dancer, but for both of us, it's a way to shout art still exists and to say we are here and we are here to stay. And I think that's the way for us to. Thank you for showing our movies.
Thank you so much to all
Or maybe
of you.
our shout in a way.
Yeah, we are screaming with you, all of us. And now I would like the famous last words go to Ursula. Go back to Ursula. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It was such an amazing event. I'm almost speechless, almost speechless. A very, very big thank you to my crew in the backstage, Jutta Kleren and Ofer Waldmann, who supported me during this whole event and also before, technically and with the content and everything. Without them, I think I would have gone up the wall with my nervosity and so on. So before we end this live stream and say goodbye, let me also thank you, Inbal and Etgar Keret, for your wonderful remarks for this marvelous film. I hope there will be many, many more projects that you can do together. And also let me thank Hetty and Stefan Berg for their input. I think this is also very remarkable, and I hope we will see much more from you and hear much more from you in the future, maybe with a collaboration between the two museums, who knows? Okay, so thank you again, for the audience. Thank you, Anita, of course.
My pleasure.
Sorry, Anita, you did a marvelous job. Thank you once more.
Thank you so much.
And yes, thank you, the audience, for sharing this evening with us. And we wish you a good night, Laila Tov, Lehitraot, wherever you are, from our living rooms and offices and wherever you are sitting right now. So,
and see you soon, one way or the other.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye-bye.